Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite! He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Call me have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
0844 499 1000. That's the number to call to join the great debate on the mother of all talk shows. Every Friday night between 7 and 10 and only on Talk Radio. 0844 499 1000. Or you can tweet me at George Galloway or us at Talk Radio.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
We might get round to talking about that, Bam, later in the evening. In fact, I understand from that affirmative nod through the glass from my very, very clever colleagues here, we will be talking to a madman, supporter of Donald Trump, a trumpeter, you might call him. He's a radio host too, so perhaps I shouldn't be so rude. It would be, I think, the beginning of an institution, Edward, if we began each Friday night by telling the listeners who was too frit, too feared, too chicken to appear on the mother of all talk shows, although that might get too long. Maybe that would take up my entire monologue. Let me just focus on a couple. The big ugly bear, Tom Watson, still can't be found. There must be a rock festival somewhere going on. Maybe the Foo Fighters. Oh, wait. And where's Wally? He's still missing. And who's Wally? He's Owen Smith. Though we did stumble upon a rock band called the Owen Smiths, and they've turned out what we used to call a wonderful disc. I'd buy it, I'd give it 5, and you're going to hear it at some stage in the course of things. The SNP haven't made a good start. They announced today a giant listening programme. Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, announced that she wanted a thoroughgoing national debate on whether or not there should be a second independence referendum in Scotland. So naturally enough, we asked the SNP press office in Edinburgh to put somebody up to talk about this revolutionary proposal, just 2 years after the original referendum went down to a 10-point defeat. Remember, the EU referendum was a good deal closer than that. The Scottish referendum was a decisive 55 to 45. They told us it would be the last chance for a generation for the Scottish people to decide whether they wanted separatism or not. Just 2 years later, indeed less than 2 years later, because it was September 2014, so less than 2 years later, that generation that it was going to take before this matter came back on the table has miraculously shrunk. But to be fair to Nicola Sturgeon, she said she wanted to talk about it before plunging into a referendum. But not to me, not to you, not to Talk Radio. Now, there was one SNP MP, Ms. Blackman, who's been on here before. She was ready to come on, but couldn't this evening because she was otherwise engaged. But the SNP press office said, no, we will not be putting anybody up for the George Galloway show. Well, as these people should know by now, just because you won't come onto the show doesn't mean that I won't be talking about you. So I'm going to be talking about this ludicrous proposal to have another referendum less than 2 years since the last one, when oil is less than $50 a barrel, and the SNP's independence proposal was predicated on oil at $117 per barrel. I'm going to shoot your referendum down in flames, Miss Sturgeon, whether you have the guts to appear to defend it or not. We are going to be talking to someone in Scotland, though. He's one of my very favourite Scotsmen of all time. Indeed, he's my very favourite Dundonian of all time, because, well, it would be unseemly to name myself in that category. Ambassador Craig Murray was a British ambassador of distinction in Uzbekistan before Jack Straw, remember him, sacked him. For why? I quote from his dismissal letter. He sacked him for, and I quote, Mr. Straw, focusing too much on human rights to the detriment of British interests, unquote. The ultimately damning contradiction, the ultimately damning dichotomy. Too much human rights, not enough focus on British interests. The reason we're talking to Ambassador Murray, who wrote a wonderful book, Murder in Samarkand, is that the dictator, Karimov, who boiled people alive, I'm not making that up, in Uzbekistan, has himself suffered an untimely demise, and the whole country, in which Western democracies have invested so much political capital, is now on the brink of God knows what. We'll be talking, as I said earlier, to a radio host in the United States who's a mad trumpeter. I'm not saying he's mad, but he's mad for Trump, if you get my drift. Now, I'm not saying that the Labour Party's national executive is comparable to Karimov's dictatorship in Uzbekistan, but there's something deeply troubling going on in the Labour Party's leadership race. People are not disappearing. It's just their votes that are disappearing. They're disappearing at a rate and at a volume which runs a very real possibility of perverting, I use that word with a capital P and underline, perverting the course of democracy in the Labour Party. I've lost count of the number of hundreds of thousands of voters that were already purged. But there's a third category now of voters who haven't been purged. They just haven't received their ballot papers, and they're running fast out of time. Now, what value will there be in a Labour leadership result in which hundreds of thousands of people have been purged from voting, and perhaps another 100,000 just didn't get their ballot paper because of, and I quote the National Executive spokesman today, administrative errors. Well, you know, Karimov would have gone further. That's true. He would have killed the members rather than allow them to vote. But the Labour leadership doesn't go that far. It just purges them from voting for the leadership of their own party. Now, it may very well be, and the opinion polls seem to suggest it, it may very well be that Jeremy Corbyn will win in a canter in any case. It may very well be that you'd have to purge everybody except Owen Smith's family and expect any other result. The opinion poll that I talked about, and many have been speculating about, finally made its appearance this week, almost 2 weeks late. Here's what I spoke just, I think, 2 weeks ago to one of our legendary callers, Damien.
As it currently stands, he's on track to increase his mandate from the last leadership election.
Well, you see, what I heard, Damien, I can't say I heard it from the horse's mouth, because I didn't. But I heard it from a source that ought to be well informed, that the YouGov poll is being suppressed because it is so catastrophically bad for Owen Smith that it seemed like it must be some kind of aberration. And so they're double and triple checking it before releasing it, because it will leave Smith in a not just an impossible situation, he's been in that from the beginning, but a risible, a laughingstock situation. Well, that's the long and the short of it. It was 62% for Jeremy Corbyn and 38% for Owen Smith. In other words, an increase in the landslide majority won by Corbyn less than 1 year ago. Except, if enough hundreds of thousands of people are cheated by one method or another from actually casting their vote, well, maybe, just maybe, they'll be able to narrow that majority a little bit. Okay, look, I've spoken enough, I think. My views are now out there and for you to respond to. And here's how you do it. You dial me on 0844 499 1000. You call us, we'll call you back. We'll establish a clear line, and then you'll be able to talk to this great university of the airwaves that we are building up on Friday nights here on Talk Radio. Or as I say, you can tweet me as much as you like, at George Galloway or at Talk Radio.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
On Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Now, as I said, we'll be talking to a trumpeter, a supporter of Dainty Hands, later in the show. 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call me. Now, I did say that I would be talking to a very great Scotsman, Ambassador Craig Murray, later in the show. Let me talk now to the seer, the sage of psephology on these islands, from the University of Strathclyde, where he's Professor of Politics. I'm glad to say we have Professor John Curtis on the line. Professor John, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, George.
I wanted to talk about two things, if I can take your time. First is Theresa May's cabinet meeting on Brexit. Many people are beginning to suspect that either this can is going to be kicked and kicked and kicked down the road, or that what we will get out of this cabinet isn't really Brexit. What's your take on that?
Well, I think, first of all, it's no secret that the UK government had not made any preparations for Brexit in the event of a leave vote, and that indeed we've had to create some government departments and to put some civil servants in them in order to begin to be able to work out what that should mean. So the truth is, the leave vote has left the UK government unprepared. It's forced a change of Prime Minister. It's forced a change in the structure of the cabinet. And so, surprise, surprise, given also that it's been the summer and some people have been on holiday, that actually we're not that much further forward, and that certainly what the UK government might be wanting in the way of Brexit is unclear. I mean, I think we've got a bit of a clue. I mean, I think Theresa May has said enough that it's not going to be a case of the UK accepting the current rules on freedom of movement. That somehow or another there is going to be some limitation on the current position, and a limitation that, at least for a period of time, would give the United Kingdom some ability itself to say how many people from the rest of the European Union come here. She said enough for that to be clear. Now, what accompanies that, how far that is then willing to be traded for by as much access to the so-called free market as possible, or whether in fact this cabinet is going to be not searching very hard for free trade, is very unclear. And of course, even once we know what the UK government decides it would like to have, there is the small matter of getting agreement out of the European Union itself. And it's pretty clear that different parts of the European Union, different member states, have rather different views about whether to negotiate hard or soft with the UK.
Now, of course, these divisions exist within the EU, but they also exist within the cabinet, don't they? She has appointed as the three ministers who are responsible in one way or another, some with more seniority than other, Boris Johnson, David Davis, and Liam Fox. They are hard Brexiters who will not accept free movement, and even if that's at the cost of not being in the single market. Is the Tory party kicking the can internally down the road, and is a schism likely along those lines?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that, well, I think David Davis and Liam Fox might be regarded as hard Brexiteers. I think some people have their suspicion that Boris Johnson is probably somewhat softer. But the truth is that, Theresa May does face a very difficult situation. Here we have a UK government that is now committed to delivering a policy against which a majority of members of the cabinet campaigned during the referendum. It is supported by a parliamentary party that more or less divided down the middle on the question of whether the UK government should remain or leave, but certainly, of course, has a pretty substantial tinge of Euroscepticism both amongst some of the Remainers as well as amongst many of the Leavers. I mean, this does mean that managing her party and managing her government is going to be a very considerable challenge for Theresa May, and particularly, delivering something that will succeed in keeping her party together. I think it's already pretty clear. If you look at, the views of the general public, let alone the views of individual politicians, it's pretty clear that those people who voted for Remain are now hoping to make the best of what they regard as a bad job, and now hoping for a soft Brexit. And you've heard people like Anna Soubry during the course of last week arguing, look, we definitely need to stay in maximising the amount of free trade and our participation in the customs union, etc. But equally, it's also clear that others, for them, immigration is crucial. For many Tory MPs also, it's the question of sovereignty that's crucial, that at the end of the day, they want the United Kingdom to be able to control as much as possible. And managing these expectations is frankly going to be very difficult, because we're talking about a party that's divided, a country that's divided, and that the division that's there in the referendum is going to carry its way through in terms of people's interpretations of what kind of Brexit might be acceptable.
Let's change gear then, Professor, and talk for a minute or two about Nicola Sturgeon's démarche, not least because she won't come on or put anyone else up to talk about it, at least not with me.
Unless you have to talk to me instead, George.
Trust me, that's a pleasure. The referendum, they told us that it was the last chance for a generation for the Scottish people to decide whether to go for separatism or not. That generation turns out to have been less than 2 years. She's announced less than 2 years since the referendum that she wants another one. Is that realistic? And if it were to happen, what's your reading of what the outcome would be?
Well, Nicola Sturgeon has quite carefully so far not said that she definitely wants another independence referendum. Why not? Because she knows, like everybody else, that in much the same way as the Brexit referendum has left the UK as a whole divided pretty much down the middle on its attitudes towards the European Union, so the Scottish independence referendum of September 2014 has also left Scotland divided pretty much down the middle as to whether or not it does or does not want to be part of the United Kingdom. And aware of that backdrop, on the one hand, she has had to keep her party together. by saying to them, well, look, we might hold a referendum if the circumstances look right, but on the other hand, not committing herself. And today's event, which was the launch of a somewhat delayed summer offensive, in fact, in many ways, I think was originally devised back in March when she announced it as an exercise, as it were, to keep her party happy and occupied while avoiding any commitment to an independence referendum. So the exercise is meant in part to be a massive consultation with large numbers of people in Scotland, but also perhaps crucially for the SNP to rethink some of its vision of independence, particularly with respect to economics, but particularly with respect to the currency, areas where they feel they felt that things were weak. Now, that said, it was always the case, and Nicola Sturgeon was quite upfront with voters and quite upfront with David Cameron. Look, the one thing I can actually think of that might mean that in the next 5 years, and we're just now into a new Scottish government term, I might hold another referendum, is if the UK votes to leave the European Union. And to that extent, at least, therefore, she's been reasonably consistent in her word. The problem she faces, however, is that while there was a bit of evidence immediately after the EU referendum that maybe there'd been just enough of a swing in Scotland in favour of independence, that maybe there was finally a majority in favour, the more recent polling evidence, including polls come out today, suggests that actually nothing much has changed. That still means Scotland's divided, but it still means that it looks as though there's a small majority still in favour of the union. But I think the truth is, George, that for so long as this country is as divided as it is, the independence question is going to keep going, because the truth is the level of support for independence, while it isn't enough for the nationalists at the moment to call a second independence referendum with any confidence, and therefore Nicola Sturgeon has to be quite careful what she promises about the next 12 months, it is frankly also far higher than any unionist can find comfortable. The truth is, irrespective of what politicians said, in terms of the de facto reality, the September 2014 referendum failed to settle the issue of Scotland's constitutional future. And even if there isn't a referendum, the debate is certainly going to carry on.
Professor John Curtis, brilliant as always. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
We will. 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. You can tweet, as I said, at George Galloway or at Talk Radio, or preferably both, so my bosses know how busy the Twitter feed is. This is from Mildenhall first. George, I may not fully relate in politics, but kudos to you for standing up and being a voice. And Haravik says, I voted UK, but a lot has changed. EU was a big factor for me due to powers the UK has that Scotland wouldn't. This in relation to the proposed second referendum. James Casey says, I get both sides of the argument, but you can't have constant referendums until you get what you want. Fair point, James, and fair play to Ronnie Cowan, MP for Inverclyde, for the SNP, for being good enough to rise to the occasion, to come and talk on his party's launch today. Although he's only got a few minutes, I'm very grateful to him for joining me. Ronnie, thanks for this.
No problem at all, George.
I know you're pushed, so I'll go right into it. I've just been talking with Professor Curtis. He was making the point that there's an opinion poll today which seems to suggest that if there was another referendum, the result would be more or less the same. Does that not seem to suggest that this is an internal party exercise that Nicola was involved in today? She's can't really be serious about going back to the country for yet another referendum.
Well, going back to the country for, George, is a conversation. And the first time we started this conversation in earnest, the polls were showing us at something at 23 or 26%. Over the course of time, people engaged, they got better informed, they listened, we talked, and that number rose to 45% come the day. Had that conversation got cut off because that was the date we were given. Who knows where that conversation is going to go to? And things have changed since that last referendum. Not just Brexit, but Brexit's a huge effect on this. And we have to have that conversation to find out what's in the minds of the people of Scotland now. It's a listening exercise, it's a conversation, it's a two-way thing. We want to hear what the people of Scotland want for their country, and we want to hopefully understand that they want to progress towards being a fully independent country.
Well, of course, I'm aware of politicians in listening mode. It's usually a ruse. You might not have been at Westminster long enough to know it, but in Westminster, when governments say they're in listening mode, they're usually just putting up some mood music in which they intend to proceed. You don't think it's the case here?
I genuinely don't feel. I came to this through, I went for Scottish National Party reviews, but I ran the Yes campaign here in Inverclyde, and we were coming from absolutely nowhere. No way was Inverclyde ever going to vote to become as part of independent Scotland, and we lost out here by 86 votes. That's how close it came here, 86 votes. Now, that was because the campaign I ran here in Inverclyde, we listened. We brought very good speakers from across the political spectrum, and we filled halls, church halls, scout halls, wherever people wanted to go to, and we listened to what people had to say. We listened to the speakers, we took questions from the floor, and it was a genuine conversation. That's how I see it running again, and on a national scale.
So, if the conversation seems to indicate that there isn't the appetite, A, for a referendum, and B, if there is one, for independence, what happens then? Has she marched 10,000 men to the top of the hill and going to have to march them down again?
Well, the First Minister has announced we'll have a conversation. Politicians, good politicians, do have conversations, and they listen to what their constituents have to say on a whole range of issues. I've got lots of different issues here in Inverclyde that have to be addressed, but I need people to bring a lot of these things to my attention, because people quite often bring solutions. The people at the heart, the bleeding edge of some problems, whether it be child poverty or crime or drink and drug addiction, are very often the best people to help me understand the problems and help find solutions for them if I possibly can. And I see it as an extension of that. I'm absolutely genuine and say, I want to hear what the people of Scotland have got to say.
And will you abide by what you hear from them? That's the point I'm making.
I'm not trying to railroad into anything or hoodwink into anything. I genuinely believe in my heart of hearts that if people take on board the exercise, they'll come out thinking this the same way as I do. But if they don't, then absolutely I respect the will of the people of Scotland.
Well, that's good to hear. Would have been good to hear it from Nicola Sturgeon. I'm going to go out on a limb here, Ronnie, and predict that this isn't really, very well sounds, you're a very sincere sounding guy, may well be in your case. But I think the SNP have decided that another referendum is going to happen. Now, if I'm right on that, and if it does happen, do you feel in your heart of hearts, you referred to your heart of hearts earlier, do you feel in your heart of hearts that the result's going to change? And if it doesn't, are we going to have to go through this a third time, a fourth time, a never-endum?
A never-endum, that phrase, yeah. Well, you know, we're already talking about what we're going to do with Brexit as well. I believe this time round the people of Scotland will be in a situation where they'll be better informed. We were lied to last time. People know we were lied to last time. We were lied before the Brexit vote. People are already seeing that. You know, George, the political opinion in Scotland and the political appetite in Scotland is absolutely massive. People want to be involved in this conversation, and I'm quite confident the next time round the people of Scotland will vote for independence. But well, we can't turn our back on these people and say, we're not going to have that conversation with you now. People in Scotland want to talk about it. We love talking about politics now. It's a thing we've grown into. You've done it all your life. But more and more people in Scotland want to do this. They're talking about it at school gate. They're talking about it in pubs and clubs. They're talking about it over family dinners. And it's a genuine conversation people are having. We can't deny them that. All we're always saying here is as the political power in Holyrood and as the real opposition at Westminster, we want to engage in that conversation with you. The conversation is already going on. What we're saying is we're an important part of that.
Yeah, I get that, Ronnie. I'm just trying to establish whether it's a real conversation or it's one where the result of the conversation has already been fixed in advance. I know you need to go.
I've come from this afternoon with a whole day with all my fellow MPs and MSPs and MEPs. And I'm not a spokesperson on that, but I genuinely get the feeling from the people around me that we honestly believe the best thing we can do for the people of Scotland is open up a conversation to hear what they've got to say. And yes, there will be disagreements along the way. There's a learning process we've got to go through, and where all the answers will come from. They don't all live within the Scottish National Party, so we have to throw open and say to people, what is the best way to run our country, and how can we do it in an effective and responsible fashion? And I genuinely believe that's the path we're on. Well,
let me finally throw this into the conversation. I'm going to argue that it will be more difficult to win an independence referendum now than it was before, for the following reasons. First of all, there would be absolutely no question now, and I think the SNP have accepted that, of an independent Scotland using the pound issued by the Bank of England. Secondly, if Scotland were to be allowed to join the European Union after independence, and we both know that's not a given, but if it were to happen, there would then be a hard border between Scotland and England. There would have to be, because England would not be in the EU and Scotland would be in the EU. Do you sense that there's a big appetite in Scotland for a new currency based on we don't know what and a hard border between Scotland and England?
Well, you've taken two massive leaps there, George. Yes, currency has to be revisited. Nobody's questioning that. Right now, we're still in Europe. Until Theresa May gets the gumption up to actually serve Article 50, and we don't know what's happening there. They came out of Chequers with a mass meeting of her cabinet, and at the end of the day, they always looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders. You know, they've marched us up. We talk about marching up to the top of the hill. They marched us out of Europe, had a look around, and the people that led us out, they've all disappeared. They don't want to take responsibility. That's the difference. The Scottish National Party does want to take responsibility and wants to march the people of Scotland forward. But you've taken two huge leaps there, which we've not done yet. Yeah? So we are still part of Europe. Let's just see. That's out with our hands. What's going to happen in Westminster over the next few weeks, next few months? When is Article 50 going to get served?
Well, that's a fair point, but nobody seriously, neither the government nor the opposition, are saying that we're not going to leave the EU, and you want to stay in the EU. And if you were an independent country, then that means one part of the island is in the EU and the other part of the island is not. That necessitates a hard border between the two parts of the island, surely.
All things, as you know, in politics are negotiable.
Okay, Ronnie, you've been very kind with your time, because I know that you were pushed for it, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much.
Can I ask a very quick, I'm trampling your time here.
Go ahead.
Very quick shout out for a local charity that's going on.
Yeah, go ahead, Ronnie, go ahead.
September is Glow Gold Month. It's for raising awareness of child cancer. You know, a big thing we're kicking off in Inverclyde last night where we flooded the local buildings, lots of local school kids out. It's run by local woman Gillian Mowat for her son Nathan, who's 2/3 way through his chemotherapy treatment. He's doing really well. We're all very proud of him. And we've got a Just Giving page up, and it's under a place I'm sure you're very familiar with, the Royal Hospital for Sick Children in Glasgow, and every donation is kindly accepted.
Ronnie, we'll do our best to promote that. Tweet me with that, and I'll circulate it. Thanks very much for your time.
Cheers, George.
Cheers. Thanks a lot. That was Ronnie Cowan, the SNP MP for Inverclyde. He stepped forward into the breach because the SNP were not prepared to put someone up, quote, for the George Galloway show. Well, he just proved that it is possible, even for a separatist, to have a sensible argument with me. He didn't engage, because I didn't really give him time to, with these two gigantic issues that lie in the way of, first of all, having a Scottish independence referendum, and secondly, winning one. This is the mother of all talk shows, with me, George Galloway.
Big Georgie Galloway's back on the radio! Galloway, celebrate! The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
on Talk Radio.
0844 499 1000. That is the number to call. Now, the issue of the Scottish referendum resounds in the Singapore Straits, evidently, because Craig is on the line from Singapore. Go ahead, Craig.
Good evening, George. Pleasure to talk to you.
And you, and to what does Scotland owe your interest in this matter? Are you a Scotsman?
There is some Scottish blood running through the family with sisters of Stannis and Stuart and Dom, so I thought I'd just chip in. I love listening to the show, and I was up late, so I thought I'd...
very kind of you. Very, very kind of you. Go ahead, Craig. Tell us what you think.
George, I'm just puzzled. I have a lot of respect for the people of Scotland, and I just continue to be perennially puzzled as to why they want to join this club. I mean, this week we've seen that the European Union has served papers on Apple to get Apple to pay $13 billion. I think we could have a whole program on the merits of that or not, but they served those papers around the Irish government and forcing Ireland to basically stand alongside Apple against the EU, against a member state while all this is going on. And it seems like they've been given scant regard to, arguing a case before all that was done. And then we've seen now that and it can't be without coincidence, that this TTIP that's been rearing on with the US, this international trade partnership between the EU and the US. It's taken 3 years. I think there's been 14 odd rounds of negotiations with EU ministers and those in the US. And not one of the 27 charters of the trade pact have been agreed. They're trying to align 23 moving parts against a backdrop that's continually moving. Now, given all of that, I just don't see, with deference to everybody I know in Scotland, how a relatively small nation like Scotland is going to be able to argue on its own a case which isn't going to get it dragged into all of these sorts of disputes. So it's clear that, there is some degree of coincidence between this US trade pact falling over and then the EU having a go at Apple over tax and trying to make the supremacy of EU law take precedence over that in Ireland. And I'm afraid if the Scottish legislature thinks it's going to have any better ride, then they're completely mistaken. Now, having said that, I think there's a lot of very good historical reasons why the rest of the United Kingdom could have been nicer to Scotland, and I think the UK government needs to accelerate that to take the steam out of this, because I think there isn't anybody realistically, no sensible person in the United Kingdom who'd like to see Scotland leave.
Well, I couldn't have put that better myself, Craig, from A to Z. Let's look at the Irish situation. The EU bureaucracy has utterly humiliated the Irish government, has put them in the deepest possible political trouble, because their people are saying, what do you mean you don't want 13 billion euros from Apple? What do you mean? Do you know what we could do with that 13 billion euros? And the Irish government is left stranded whistling Dixie, or the Irish equivalent, saying it's a matter of our sovereignty, and the EU is saying you ain't got any sovereignty. There are tax rates that are agreed across the EU in relation to corporation tax, and you have undercut them, and you have acted unlawfully under the EU's rules. And so our law is superior to yours, and you'll have to do what we tell you to do. Now, as it happens, nobody could be more hostile to Apple paying derisory amounts of tax than me. But on the other side, this shows how the EU truly regards not just small countries like Ireland. Spain and Portugal have been served papers by the EU warning them that if they don't introduce more austerity into their economies, they're going to be sanctioned by the EU. Now, I say that in the week that it has been demonstrated yet again that more than half of all the young people often say in this country, by the way, Craig, the young people really love the EU. Well, ask the young people in Spain, in Portugal, in Greece, what they think of an EU which has left more than half of them rotting on the dole, unemployed, with no hope, and with their government, in all three cases, Greece, Spain, Portugal, being ordered by the EU to be even more savagely austere than they already have been. And on your last point, you're right. I mean, I was a campaigner for Home Rule for Scotland, a leading campaigner over many years in favour of Home Rule for Scotland, for a powerful Scottish Parliament. And as it happens, my ideas have evolved in that I'm in favour of a fully federal state here, so that Scotland would be a federal country and a part of a federation in this island. But that's for another night. What I'm against is fooling people that by hey presto, now we're independent, A, that you'd get into the European Union, B, that it would be right to be in the European Union, C, that this would not profoundly change, and to your detriment, relations between an independent Scotland in the EU and an England and Wales outside of the EU. You get my drift?
Well, and I would just caution Scotland that before, if they are going to go this referendum route, what they should find out is what the school fees are going to be for joining this club. Because, lo and behold, they don't want to be in the club and then get told that they've actually got a $50 billion a year contribution to make up for the UK coming out and all those other nations who are going to be bankrupted and can't pay their school fees. And they're not going to cut their costs to shape their club. So I think, they can't then get into the club and find out, we don't like the look of this, let's have another referendum, see whether we really want to stay in here. So
exactly. Imagine that. Imagine breaking away from the rest of Britain and then concluding that actually joining the European Union isn't the good idea that the SNP leaders said it was. And by the way, Craig, 1/3 of SNP voters voted for Brexit. Exactly the same proportion to a percentage point as the percentage of Labour voters who voted against Brexit. Craig, it's been a pleasure talking to you late at night out there in Singapore. Let me go through some of the huge tide of Twitter. Neil McLaughlin says, as a great believer in devolution, I have serious doubts about Sturgeon. The power will overwhelm me. And Haravik is back on. He says, I also didn't consider 55% decisive. That's only a 5% swing. The EU was even closer at a 2% swing. Well, look, in a binary choice, in a binary referendum, you win or you lose. And the SNP lost the referendum by 55 to 45, which, by the way, is exactly the number that I predicted on Andrew Neil's Sunday Politics on the Sunday before polling day. And now I shall read the winning ticket for tomorrow night's lottery. Now, we're talking about Scottish independence. We're talking about Brexit. We're going to be talking, I'm sure, about the purge of Labour members in the Labour leadership contest. This is the only free space in the entire mainstream media where you can talk about that. Everywhere, and I mean everywhere, is wall-to-wall sneering, sniggering cynicism about what the vast majority of Labour members surely want. And we'll be talking to a mad trumpeter. He's not mad, I don't mean that, because I've never met him yet, or even heard him. But it seems to me to be mad about Trump definitely raises questions. So we'll be talking about Trump later. But we're also going to be talking about the junior doctors who are now forced back on strike as part of a discussion about the National Health Service and its chronic underfunding and the extent to which it is buckling under the strain and is being set up to fail so that privatization can be the last resort. We'll be talking to Craig Murray, the former ambassador to Uzbekistan, the man who wrote Murder in Samarkand and who got sacked by Jack Straw for focusing too much on human rights to the detriment of British interests.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
A radio star is born.
You're going to love
Talk Radio. Talk Radio.
It's the mother of all talk shows with me, George Galloway, every Friday night between 7 and 10. We're crossing the world from the United States to Uzbekistan, to Scotland, and to Britain, and to the United States, where we're talking to a trumpeter and the junior doctors who are being forced to strike all over again. It's the mother of all talk shows with me, George Galloway, only on Talk Radio.
across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Listener comrades of the world, unite! He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Call me have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. You call us, we'll call you right back. And you'll be on the radio talking to the most educated, most articulate audience on British radio. The mother of all talk shows. You can text and talk, although, frankly, we have just been overwhelmed by Twitter and by text, and the system has crashed. So I'm going to have to read the tweets off my telephone. Well, it's a compliment of sorts. In this next hour, I'm going to be talking about the doctors. There is no group of workers in Britain more honoured and respected than junior doctors. So how come they're back on the stones?
Call me have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
There was great rejoicing in the land when the rumour swept the country that Theresa May's first cabinet reshuffle had swept. Now let me choose my alliteration carefully. Swept Jeremy Hunt out of the cabinet. It sent a wave of euphoria through the workers in the National Health Service. Alas, alas, it was a false alarm. It was a rumour that was unfounded, and he is still in charge of our National Health Service. There are many consequences of this and the policy that he is employed to implement, and indeed previous governments, not just David Cameron's, but previous to that, have been implementing in the National Health Service. Effectively, there was a spike in spending on health under the Blair and Brown governments, but there was a catch. Much of it, a huge amount of it, was private finance in the series of PFI and PPP initiatives of the new Labour years. This has led to a gigantic yoke, albatross of debt in the National Health Service, together with effective underfunding by the last Cameron government and until now the Theresa May government, which is leading to a crisis in the National Health Service, so much so obvious, everybody knows that. What's controversial about what I'm saying is that this is deliberate, in my view. They want people to believe that the National Health Service is a dead duck and that something else will have to take its place. Despite the fact that we actually have the most efficient health service in the world, far more efficient than any of the models so beloved of the free marketeers in the big pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer and the other parasites that are sucking the blood of the NHS on its edges and hoping to edge closer to its heart. I hear it all the time. Yes, we love the NHS, but it can't go on like this. What they mean by like this is not what you and I might mean, that it needs more funds and it needs its personnel, its workforce, to be more respected. That's not what they mean. They mean it can't go on like this, therefore it has to morph into something very different. And so, the junior doctor strike, just announced, is just a symptom, to use a medical piece of terminology, of a deeper sickness in the NHS, at least in my opinion. Let's hear from Dr. Matt Pickover, who is a general practitioner and who's an eloquent man on these subjects. Dr. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
What do you think of what I just said? First of all, what's the scale of the crisis? And am I right in suspecting that it's a crisis that is being deliberately engendered?
I think that's certainly the feeling that many people in the professions in the NHS would have. We've seen a 4% increase in activity levels year on year for something like the past decade, but we've only really seen a 1% uplift in funding over that year. What that means is that basically there's a massive gap between what we need and what we've got. Somehow we've got to find billions of pounds in efficiency savings. I don't know what efficiency savings mean really. There's a few bits of slack, I'm sure, that could be trimmed away, but if you want to keep people alive, it costs money.
I'm right in saying, and I'm that our health service, measuring outcomes against the investment in it, is the most efficient in the world. It's
certainly up there, that's for sure. We have some pretty good outcomes for pretty minimal outlay. To give an example, roughly per patient, all of the general practice that you get per year costs about 135 quid. At least that's what practices get for looking after you. So you could come every day of the year and the doctor surgery would still only get about 135 quid for that, which is less than a couple of months of satellite telly subscriptions. It's amazing value, really.
It is fantastic value for money, and if we put more money in, we'd get even better value. But it's not just about money, is it? It's about the respect or lack of it that the government has for the people in the profession. And that is being demonstrated most graphically at this point in time by the junior doctors' dispute.
Well, I would say that for several years that those of us, particularly in primary care and general practice and then hospital doctors, seem to have been pilloried in the press. And I was just trying to think, what's so bad about keeping your nan alive? What have I done that's wrong? I mean, I wrote articles on the subject in the past about how we don't seem to be the kind of superhero anymore. Now I'm the bad guy. When the kids ask me, are you a goodie or a baddie? Well, I don't know. If you read some papers, I'm the bad guy. Yet, how many lives have me and my friends saved this week? It does make you wonder, what is it that I've done to harm society as a professional, as a doctor, when really I don't think any of us enter med school with anything other than the noblest of intentions. It's damn hard to get in for a start.
I can't tell you how sad that last few sentences that you spoke make me feel. But that's not all that important. This is important, though. You start off with fantastic goodwill. As you say, everybody has a nan that you've saved or helped. Everybody knows that they've either had to come to you for help or one day will come to you for help. Every man has got a wife. Every woman that is a mother knows that when you have children, both at the GP level and at the hospital level, everything depends on you. You ought to have the best public relations in the entire society, but you don't. And I'm wondering if doctors are beginning to ask themselves why that is. Why has not more been done or more successfully done by the doctors on the public relations front, because I'm not sure, with all respect to them, that the BMA has done the best job in keeping levels of public support for you that there ought to be.
I think it's a very difficult thing to sort of define, really. We, on a day-to-day basis, pretty much everybody I see says thank you, even when I've given them terrible news. It's a strange thing, that relationship between doctor and patient, and there isn't really another one like it. I think, at all levels of the NHS, from the sort of orderlies and all the way to the chief execs, have such importance and value because they do the impossible practically day in, day out. And, we're just another cog in that big machine. But I think for some reason we're seen or being sort of denigrated in public at large. I think day to day, at least my patients would be better judges than I. I seem to get sort of individual respect as a profession and a section of society that seems to be waning, and you're just trying to think, well, what more can we do?
Well, something needs to be done, because Theresa May, it's not just Jeremy Hunt, is it? Theresa May today weighed in. You've never had it so good, she said.
It certainly doesn't feel like that to most of my junior colleagues. And I've been away from sort of junior doctor land for about 6 years now. When I trained, it was about a 60-hour week or so, which was doable for a young man about town. Before my predecessors, they were doing a 100-hour week, which, killed them basically. It was exhausting and dangerous. Our current generation of doctors may work similar hours to mine, but their work-life balance is very, very fragmented. Some of the details of this new contract would have discriminated against women and academics. And you think, well, how can that be feasible in the 21st century? In terms of political shenanigans, sometimes I think the government will get their way, whatever. But the question I ask is, what sort of NHS does the public, does the British public want? And if you want a good NHS, we're going to have to pay for it. And if you keep letting things like this happen, funding being stripped and services closed, then you're going to have the NHS you deserve, which is none at all. And that scares me, because one day I'm going to be ill and I'm going to need some help.
So what happens next, Doctor? Are these strikes now inevitable?
Well, I think we've got, 10, 12 days to the first one, and
yes.
There's a lot of talks that are going to be needed, a lot of coffee, a lot of tired people are going to have to hammer this out, because I don't think anybody wants to go on strike, and I don't think the nation wants these strikes to happen. But what other option do they have when the government isn't listening to them and the NHS is being destroyed around us? Let's think about how long it takes for our friends and families to see hospital consultants. The waits are getting larger. It's the summer and hospitals are full. There is no slack in the system whatsoever. We've got fewer beds now than some Eastern European countries. And we're, the top 6 economy in the world? How has that been permitted to happen? We've got enough money. It's just whether we choose to spend it on the right things.
Doctor, you've been very helpful. Dr. Matt Pickover, down in Suffolk, but talking about a crisis in our national health service of great moment. And I'm arguing that the junior doctors dispute is only a symptom of a wider and deeper malaise. Peter Grant, on the subject of the oil price, one of the reasons, only one, that I don't believe the Scottish people would vote for independence is that the oil price is under $50 a barrel. And moreover, the amount of oil in the North Sea sector, if Scotland inherited all of it, is of course steeply declining. Peter Grant makes the point, and if a superpower like Russia is struggling with that economic price, what chance Scotland? Vera Finlayson says, George, I like you, follow you, I just don't get your anti-Scottish independence. Well, stick around, Vera, keep following, because you're going to hear lots from me on that subject, and not just here on Talk Radio.
Call me have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
0844 499 1000. That's the number to call me. Or you can tweet me, as Gavin Gordon has. George, I spoke to a Spanish girl today. Her and her 3 brothers all have degrees. None has a job. Well, that's the point I was making earlier. We keep hearing about how young people love the EU. What young people love and ought to love is Europe. Nobody could love Europe more than me. But Europe is not the EU. Not this EU. Not this EU run on these rules by these people. Get that? Get that? There's nothing xenophobic, nothing Little Englander, let alone anything racist about that. We stand in solidarity with those young people in Spain, in Portugal, in Greece, and in Ireland, where the EU bureaucracy has just utterly humiliated the Irish government, left them bereft, left them on the verge, if I'm not wrong, of being forced out of office on the basis of their decisions about their tax rates in their country. As it happens, I support the EU decision on Apple's taxation, rather than the right-wing Irish government. But to what extent is Ireland an independent country when the EU can order it what tax it must levy on multinational corporations? Steve is in Nuneaton. Welcome, Steve.
Good evening, George. An absolute pleasure to speak to you again.
Welcome, sir. Go ahead. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I'd like to hear your opinion on the MP Clive Betts that's trying to put forward to the NEC the rule change at party conference and reinstate the electoral college system. Isn't that where they split the voting into thirds, George?
Well, funnily enough, I support an electoral college. It wasn't the left who introduced one member, one vote. It was the right. It was the right of the Labour Party that systematically reduced and reduced and reduced the power of trade unions in the Labour Party. I always defended the trade unions. I opposed one member, one vote. But once you've got one member, one vote, you can't decide to scrap it because you don't like the way the members are using their votes.
Yeah, exactly.
Let alone purging and losing and extinguishing by one means or another the votes of hundreds of thousands of your own members.
Yes.
So I don't see how you can go back to the status quo ante. It was a status quo ante that I loved. I campaigned for 40, 30, 30. That was the original victory. That was the original Bennite demand. 40% for the trade unions, 30% for the constituency Labour parties, and 30% for the MPs. That would have given the MPs a great deal more power than they currently have, but they didn't want that. They went for this cockamamie, one member, one vote. Well, now they've got it, and they better just like it or lump it.
Yeah, I just think it's more of the same PLP game, just continuing, undermine, divide, all the same thing, George, I think. It's just terrible.
Well, I think their time's running out, I think. Go on.
Yeah, what's your opinion on this redrawing up the constituency boundaries again, which will likely get rid of about 30 Labour seats? What do you think about that, George?
Well, every time there's a reorganisation of boundaries, the government that is introducing them advantages itself and disadvantages the opposition parties. That's what happened. You may recall, Steve, I got expelled in 2003, but just in case, they then abolished my constituency. So if the left hook didn't get me, the right hook was bound to get me. And that's why I had to move from Glasgow to the east end of London, where I was elected in a rather famous victory. So I know about the redrawing of boundaries, and in this case, this redrawing is designed to assist the Tories. But as we now ought to know, if we didn't before, no one can predict the course of British politics over this next period. All the experts told us, every one, even the betting market told us. They told us about 2 or 3 a.m. on the morning after the referendum that a Remain vote was 97% certain.
Yeah, I'd like to, yeah, can I?
And by 4 a.m., we were out of the EU. So
Yeah.
I don't buy that Labour will necessarily lose the seats that the Boundary Commission has in mind, neither that the Tories will necessarily win the ones that they're advantaged therein.
Yeah, I always thought, George, that Brexit, with the way the people's voted, was going to be the catalyst for a people's movement. I mean, that happened with the Brexit vote, and I think that's been continuing now. And I think it's not only here. I think you've seen it in Europe and America with Bernie Sanders and all that. I think there's a push to get rid of the old system of government and reinstate a real people's movement for government, so that we have a parliament in the end, George, that's worthy of the name of a people's government, worthy of the name of a good Labour Party to instill that government and infuse it with new movement, you know.
Amen to that. Thanks, Steve, in Nuneaton. Let's squeeze Ian in Palmer's Green in. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, hi, George. It's Ian Puddock.
Hello, Ian Puddock, my dear friend. Go ahead.
I'm delighted to speak to you. Thank you. Just a thought. I've just caught the back end of your show talking about the NHS, and I just wanted to put something on your radar. I'm not a fan of the BBC, but they made a wonderful, wonderful series, a documentary called Can Jerry Robinson, former head of Coca-Cola, fix the NHS? And it was over 3 episodes, and they gave him a huge ward. There was hemorrhaging money, incurring huge losses, a waiting list galore, and they said, basically, you've got to fix this, and we're not giving you any money. And they filmed the process of him remanaging the whole of that particular project. And he was obviously very successful at the end, and it was a whole world of pain for him. I mean, you really, really felt for him. But he succeeded in doing it. And it's just a wonderful documentary. I've just tweeted you a link to it. And it just shows you it's not about cuts. It's not about saving money. It's about proper management. And with the right resources, you can achieve miracles, which he literally did.
Ian, thanks for that in Palmer's Green. And I will follow that link. A Coca-Cola NHS, that's kind of what they have in mind for the whole service. You know, in the United States, if you fall over, the ambulance personnel feel for your wallet before they feel your pulse, because depending on the size of your wallet will depend the quality of the healthcare that you will get. My old father, God rest him, used to say if the Tories could bottle the air that you breathe and sell it to you, they would. In fact, they would oxygenate you with a kind of meter that you had to keep filling, or you'd run out of oxygen. These people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And they know the price of everything because they know the profit in everything. And it is a standing affront to the Tories and people who think like them that we should have a National Health Service in the first place. For younger listeners, please note this. The National Health Service didn't appear out of the clouds. Somebody didn't come along and give it to us on a silver platter. The National Health Service had to be clawed, and I mean clawed, with blood from the hands of those who opposed it. You saw the right-wing resistance to Obamacare, which is a pale, pale shadow of a National Health Service. Well, think back to the 1930s and 40s and know this, that the Tories hated the National Health Service. Why? Because it was socialism in action. It didn't matter how rich you were, you got the best health care available, whether you were rich or whether you were poor. And that's not a system of society that the people on the right are prepared to countenance. Now, for decades, they had to pay lip service to the NHS. But now, they're not just fattening it up, as it were. They're cutting it down, slimming it down, until we all think it's in such parlous condition that we'll have to change it into something else.
He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Now, as I said, because our system has collapsed through sheer volume, I'm having to go through these on my phone, so bear with me. George Gibson sends a nice one vis-a-vis Europe. He says, we used to call it the continent, if you remember. Listen up, George. I still call it the continent. I still call it Europe as if we were not a part of it. But I love European civilization. I love the people of Europe. It's the EU that I don't love. Now, let me go through and see what I've got here. Sean says the caller Steve from Nuneaton was brilliant. Well, he was. And Think Like Me says, I've just watched your film, The Killings of Tony Blair. Great film. Angry now. Thank you very much for that. As I say, I'm thumbing through them. That documentary that Ian Puddock was mentioning, Can Jerry Fix the NHS? I look forward to watching that. Now, coming up later in the programme, we've got Craig Murray, as I said. We've got J.T. Williamson, the host of the J.T. Show on Super Talk, Mississippi. It's not sounding all that promising for me. So far, MISSI, the J.T. Show, J.T. Williamson, big supporter of Donald Trump. Well, I better just flex my muscles ready for that confrontation. And don't forget that after me at 10 o'clock is Ian Lee on the air. Ian's a great broadcaster. I always love his show on the way home. Now, you heard me say earlier that one of my all-time favourite Scotsmen is Ambassador Craig Murray. He was the British ambassador to Uzbekistan, and he was sacked by Jack Straw. Not my favourite person, as you probably already know. He was sacked, and Jack Straw actually put this in writing. I've seen it on the letter. Not a copy, I've seen the letter. It says that his services have been dispensed with. He's been withdrawn as the British ambassador in Uzbekistan because he had, and I quote, focused too much on human rights at the expense of British interests, which I always thought was just the perfect dichotomy. Now, Craig Murray is in great demand today because the brutal dictator, Karimov, who has ruled with an iron fist Uzbekistan and was responsible for the aforementioned human rights abuses, has suddenly died, leaving Uzbekistan up a gum tree or up whatever their river is without a paddle. So I'm glad to say he joins us now. Ambassador Craig Murray, good evening.
Good evening, George.
Now, you were infamously dismissed by our disgraced Foreign Secretary, as was Jack Straw, for, and I quote, concentrating too much on human rights to the disadvantage of British interests. There you have it, the ultimate dichotomy. What did he mean? What were you doing? And why did you have the need to do it?
Well, at that time, the Americans had a Air Force base in Uzbekistan, as did the Germans, and were operating into Afghanistan out of Uzbekistan. And I was told my job was to support the Americans and to support President Karimov. But the Karimov regime was an obvious disaster. It had tens of thousands of political prisoners. It was torturing people to death on a regular basis, literally hundreds of people killed every year, and was keeping people in a state of slavery, picking cotton. So it seemed to me this just wasn't something which, as somebody meant to be representing Britain, I should be supporting. And obviously, Straw and I had very different views on the importance of human rights and individual liberty.
It is an extraordinary story, and too little canvassed how it could possibly be to the detriment of British interests to speak out about people who, I understand, some of whom were boiled alive.
Yeah, that's true. There were at least two people who, we had an official pathologist report saying that they were boiled alive and tortured to death in that way. And torture with boiling water was quite normal. Yes, and it really comes down to your view on the war on terror, because the vast majority of people who then and today were tortured and imprisoned in Uzbekistan were so simply because they were Muslims, ordinary Muslims. And if you pray 5 times a day, or the young man grows a beard in Uzbekistan, you will be imprisoned, you will be tortured, and you'll quite possibly be killed. And the idea that kind of repression is the way to fight terrorism was the complete nonsense that Straw and Blair believed. Whereas, in fact, obviously that's the way to create terrorism.
Indeed, and that's the mindset that led us into the morass across the world that we're currently in. But we'll turn to that another time, perhaps. You're an expert still on the country, Uzbekistan. Tell us a bit about it and about what you expect to happen now.
Yeah, well, it's very much, a one-party state. There's not any genuine democracy, freedom of speech, free media, anything like that, and there won't be a free and fair election of any kind. The oligarchs will decide who should take over from Karimov, and it's a country where the economy is very carefully controlled, and it exports a limited number of commodities, gold, uranium and cotton, and the proceeds of those are kept exclusively to a small number of families. My expectation is that Prime Minister Mirziyoyev is the most likely successor to Karimov. He's been Karimov's enforcer. He's just a complete thug. I met him on a number of occasions. And he's at least as brutal as Karimov, but doesn't have Karimov's cunning and intelligence. So I don't expect it all to end well.
Now, this is a Muslim country, but Karimov was in the last Politburo of the USSR. He was a communist. It's a bit odd, isn't it, that we were such good friends with somebody from the final last Politburo, yet we are at daggers drawn all the time with Putin, who was never anything in the Soviet Union. He was just an ordinary functionary.
Yeah, and Karimov wasn't just in the Politburo, he was one of the members of the attempted coup against Gorbachev. So for the West then to turn around and fate him, has an awful lot of ironies to it. Yeah, there's no doubt whatsoever that Russia has not supported or enjoyed the tyrannical nature of the Karimov regime. And Karimov's not somebody that Putin ever had a great deal of time for. Really, they come from, very different eras and very different ways of thinking.
Your wonderful book, which I recall vividly, was it Murder in Samarkand?
That's right.
It's a wonderful book. I hope it's still in print, and I hope it gets some kind of revival now. But Samarkand is this magical name. Is it a magical place?
It still is to some extent, and it was, of course, the seat of a fantastic Islamic culture, which really bore very little resemblance to the sort of Saudi-promoted, extremely narrow culture that people tend to associate with Islam. It's where Omar Khayyam and Rumi used to roam and write their poetry and engage in mysticism. So it's imbued with all that history. Sadly now, of course, it's under a very tyrannical regime, and one of the things the Uzbek government has tried to do is to stamp out the ethnic minority identities in Uzbekistan, and Samarkand is a Tajik-speaking city, but Tajik being a form of Persian, but that has been very, very heavily repressed, and all the Tajik schools closed down.
There's some reports this evening of tensions on the border with Kyrgyzstan. Do you expect a shooting war might kick off as a useful distraction for the population?
I think that's exactly what's happening. The Uzbek government has, for decades really, had foolish disputes with Kyrgyzstan over this very convoluted border, and the attempt to whip up nationalism and popular support at the moment is an effort to stop the population wondering about who's going to take over next.
So finally, in a sentence, you probably won't be going back to Samarkand anytime soon because the regime change is unlikely to be beneficial.
I fear that's almost certainly likely to be true. I don't see any fast improvement in Uzbekistan, but the hope for the future is that the system seems not to be sustainable indefinitely, because cotton production has been falling and remittances from abroad have also been falling. So the economic underpinnings of the system seem to be weakening.
Ambassador Craig Murray, thank you very much for joining us on the mother of all talk shows.
Listener comrades of the world, unite! The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Now, 0844 499 1000, that's the number to call. You can also tweet, and Simon Baker has, I think, summed it up perfectly in one sentence. I think the idea is to close the gap in order to claim Corbyn's victory narrow and thus justify the next challenge. Well, if he puts up with that, I think he's doomed. Let's take one more. Lizzie Fletcher says younger people mostly have no realization of consequences of privatization because they're not often ill. It's a very interesting observation, actually. Let's hear from Anthea on the private finance initiative issue that I raised earlier. Anthea, welcome back to the show.
Hello, George. Now, I know you have quite a few young listeners through the years. You know, in your previous incarnation, you often had young people who phoned you up and said that they had received a political education.
Yes.
So, in the interest of the common good, I'm going to explain for the youth what PFI is and why it's relevant to both the last hour and this hour.
Yeah, please.
It's a little bit like this. You can buy your house or perhaps inherit it from your granny, or you can rent your house. And if you rent your house, you keep paying rent, but you never actually own the house. And a few years ago, I was working at a school, and it was bright and shiny, and the locals had agitated to get this new school built. And that was the first time I heard those words, PFI. They said, oh, yes, it's a PFI, it's a scheme. And I found out it meant that the local community didn't own the school at all, that the council had asked a private company to build it, and of course they also run it. So they need to be constantly paid fees. And this is how it is that hospitals can end up being in debt.
I know. I mean, the very thought of it, a hospital being in debt. Of course, it's only in debt because of the PFI scheme. It was well known as a scheme.
A scam, surely you mean.
Which was a scam. You're right. You put it better than I. It was a scam to keep the expenditure off the books, but of course, in so doing, meant indebtedness forever to the private sources of the finance.
Well, it all gets better, George, because earlier on this year, while everybody was distracted shopping for Easter eggs, a wall fell down on the side of a school in Glasgow. And just before Easter, 17 schools in total were closed in the Glasgow-Edinburgh area. And up in Scotland, I'm sure your listeners know all about this, but down here in the south, it quietly disappeared from the news. And this is why I'm mentioning it today, because I was intrigued and I followed the story. And I discovered that in Scotland, that the scheme was invented by the Tories under Major, but that Mr. Blair and Mr. Brown embraced it enthusiastically. And in particular, Mr. Brown encouraged the Scottish Labour Party to switch their plans for investment from straightforwardly, say, borrowing their money from their local friendly bank at a fairly, reasonable rate of interest, to engaging in these private finance initiatives, so that despite the relatively small population in Scotland, they've got about 40% of the private finance schemes, which have been renamed, as you said, as PPP. And people will say, well, I don't care because I live in Peckham. Yes, you do care, because if a school falls down, it's not funny. And down in Exeter, they had a school where the water was poisoned with heavy metals. Iron was in the water, and the private finance company had they hid the results. You're supposed to report on the health of your school, and they fixed the books, but apparently it's all the fault of one person and nobody else knew all about it. That's right. So what we have here is a scheme that doesn't actually give us the infrastructure that we need. Much is made of how the previous Labour government built all these schools and hospitals, but I hope your listeners, particularly younger ones, now realise they didn't build schools and hospitals. What they did was have a massive Ponzi scheme where a private company was building a school and running it, and we are constantly forking out. And because I was a teacher at that time, I was interested in schools, but to my horror I have discovered, of course, that there are hospitals and even in bridges and all sorts that have been built under this scheme. And it's relevant to the previous hour because the Scottish government, if they should become independent, will be landed in a bill.
Of course they will.
A massive bill in about 20, 25 years' time. And they won't be able, they'll be, I suppose, encouraged to renew these terrible schemes. George, I'm going on at length because I'm so cross that this story disappeared from the English media. I know in Scotland they're very agitated by this, but down here we kidded ourselves that it wasn't really anything to do with us, and therefore we don't need to care about it, but it is to do with us.
You bet, and it's the future. You see, I was at a festival speaking in one of these big tent affairs quite recently, and one of the main Tory journalists, the political editor-at-large of the Daily Mail group, you can't get much more right-wing than that, she was on this wave also. She was saying, look, I know everybody loves the NHS and there's much to love about it, but we can't go on with it. In other words, that which we could afford right after the Second World War, when our country was utterly bankrupt, cannot be afforded now that our country is the 5th richest economy on the earth. Now, if you'll believe that, you'll believe anything. But unfortunately, we have all media guns blazing. And one of the things I was trying to say, I didn't perhaps put it all that well, to the GP that was on earlier, was the doctors need to do a better job of standing up for the NHS in public opinion, because they have to provide some countervailing argument. And I don't believe that the BMA does that well enough. I think it's an association rather than a union. It's old-fashioned. It doesn't understand the modern tools. They're not exactly big on Twitter and so on. Somebody needs to get to work in repopularizing the idea of an NHS, don't you think?
Well, I think that people, where my parents come from, they have a saying, you don't miss the water till the well run dry.
Yeah.
And it won't be unless we face a crisis, either a personal one or a national one, that we realise what we have. And, one of my children was making up an imaginary kingdom. You know, we all do this, don't we? Invent a story. And he said, Mama, what do I need if I'm going to run a kingdom? What do I need for my government? And I said, well, it's very simple. The three main duties of a government are to defend its people, because even if you mean peace, somebody might try to take advantage of you. So at the very least, you need some defences, something simple. And the second, the other two important things you must do are provide some sort of opportunity to learn for your people, and not just children, but also adults. And the third thing you must provide is a way to keep them healthy. And those are the three main duties. And I said, even if your government's very poor, you can prioritise those things, because what poor governments do is they don't do nothing if they're in a poor country. They just decide what to put at the top and neglect the rest. And when I visited Cuba many years ago, I saw that the roads were in a dreadful state, and everybody looks at the buildings in Havana with their very attractive decrepitude. But what people don't realise is that they've decided, well, we don't care about the road, we don't care about the buildings, because number one is our defence, our health and our education. And, you know, I have another little anecdote, George. It's story time today. Mm-hmm. I was at a conference with a lady called Dr. Ruth Love, and she was a kind of czar, we might say today, for two presidents on reading. She was supposed to advise these presidents on the area of how to raise literacy amongst young people and adults. And she went on a fact-finding tour to Cuba, and because she was American, she had been told that Cuba was a wicked, evil, failing state. So when she got there, she expected to find many people who couldn't read, because after all, America's a rich country, and we have about 20 million people who can't read in America, so surely there'll be loads of illiterate people in Cuba. And she said she stopped looking after 3 days because she couldn't find anybody who couldn't read.
No, it has the highest literacy rate in the world. It has a longer life expectancy than Washington, D.C. It has lower rates of infant mortality than Washington, D.C. Its health service is comparable with Sweden or Denmark or Norway, rather than the third world countries with which it would ordinarily be compared. Anthea, thanks for those stories, and tell your son I'd vote for that kingdom of his. We're talking about Scottish independence, we're talking about the NHS, talking about Brexit, we're talking about Donald Trump, we're talking about Uzbekistan. Is there anyone out there who's got a view on Uzbekistan? Even if you don't, you're better informed about it now than you were before this show began. Am I right about that? Graham Mackenzie sends a message. I want an independent Scotland, but do not think we should have a referendum just now. Wait 10 years from the last vote and then discuss that way, respecting the previous referendum result. I agree with that, Graham, and I'll make a deal with Nicola Sturgeon. If she'll wait 10 years to have the next referendum, I'll probably be too tired to come up the road and campaign against her. Jay says, typical when Conservatives want to privatise an idea or an institution, they make the public hate it first. What a very, very, very good point. Jay goes on, it's the same here with their USA counterpart, the Republicans. Long live the National Health Service, says Jay. Now, Thomas Runio, who has a wonderful avatar of Tommy Cooper, said, I worked building a hospital and had to fight for toilets and wet weather gear. Some don't know they're born.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
A new kind of talk radio. We'll get you talking. Talk radio.
It's the mother of all talk shows every Friday night between 7 and 10 and only on Talk Radio. Here's the number, 0844 499 1000. In the last hour, I'm going to be talking to a trumpeter from Mississippi. What could possibly go wrong? Donald Trump, Mississippi, and me. It's all coming up in the last hour.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Listen up, comrades of the world. Unite. He's a weapon of mass discussion, and he's back on your radio.
Get ready for a revolutionary rumble on your radio with the original George of the political jungle.
Galloway, celebrate. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Get it? On the radio station that gives power to the people.
Talk Radio, we'll get you talking.
Now I'm about to call J.T. Williamson, the host of the J.T. Show on Super Talk, Mississippi. And I'll tell you what, I doubt if he knows who exactly is going to be interviewing him about his hero, Dainty Hands, Donald J. Trump.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
On Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Now, do you think JT has Googled me? Do you think JT has any idea of what he's in for? Because, well, let's just hope he stays the course. Now, let me read a few more messages. Julie says, good evening, George. The appalling way in which Jeremy Corbyn and his supporters have been treated by the press and some PLP members is unprecedented. Corbyn has responded in the dignified fashion I would expect from such an honourable man. I'm looking forward to watching your film, George. Thank you, Julie, for that. It's really, Corbyn said something today that is so self-evidently correct, is so self-evidently feminist in character. Yet I had to listen to a radio programme earlier this evening where two people who would and have defined themselves as feminists sniggered and snickered and sneered and rubbished the point that he was making. The point that he was making is that just one of the reasons why women are disadvantaged in the workplace is that not as many women in the workplace go drinking after work with their peers, with their colleagues, where a lot of business and office politics is done. That is so self-evidently obvious, you would have thought that no one, least of all a woman, least of all a professional woman, least of all a professional woman who calls herself a feminist, could possibly object to it. But I had to listen to two of them do so. Made my blood boil, actually. Changed my attitude to the two people, at least one of them, that I was listening to. Now, Donald J. Trump is leading the Republican Party to catastrophe. At least that's what most people and conventional wisdom seems to suggest. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, I really hate Hillary Clinton. So no part of my objection to Donald Trump is because I want Hillary Clinton to be President of the United States. As I said last week, it's Godzilla 1 versus Godzilla 2. But I have to tell you, I'm really beginning to question the sanity, the very sanity of Donald Trump. I did question his financial bona fides alone in this country some months ago, and it looks like I was right again. Far from being a billionaire, Donald Trump dodges the people that he owes money to. He dodges the tax authorities. And who knows, he might even owe money in Mississippi, in Jackson, Mississippi, no less, where I'm sure it's a steamy afternoon, where I'm joined by a legendary host of the JT Show on Super Talk, Mississippi, J.T. Williamson. J.T., thanks for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. Glad to be here with you guys. Glad to be talking across the big pond again.
Excellent, my friend. Now, I'm of the view that Trump is going down to the mother of all landslide defeats in the presidential election. Is that how it looks to you down by the Mississippi?
No, I really don't think so. And I really think, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, if the media would actually be fair, you would understand a lot more about Donald Trump. A lot of things that are being reported, and I'm sure what gets back to Britain, is even more diluted than what it is here. The media absolutely refuses to cover anything about Hillary Clinton. It is the most corrupt, unbelievable propaganda machine that's ever been committed in the United States of America. And the journalists, if that's what you still want to call them, are now, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. They're trying to attack people who support Trump now, not just attack Trump, and yet won't report anything on Hillary Clinton. And I think that is where maybe some of the misconception that you may have or other people in Great Britain may have for Donald Trump. The truth's not really being told. And I think that's the key to this right now. And you look at some polls right now, an LA Times poll, Los Angeles, showing that Donald Trump has taken the lead again.
Well, unfortunately, for the purposes of those points, I've known Donald Trump for decades. And as a Scotsman, I know a thing or two about the promises he makes and doesn't keep. And as I said earlier, you may not have heard my intro, I despise Hillary Clinton. I really despise her. So in the sense that the media is not exposing her malfeasance, I'm with you on that, JT. The problem is that it's Godzilla 1 versus Godzilla 2. This Trump is a madman.
I disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. Well, if the media wants to report, well, he didn't pay his bill, or he has some employees here that didn't get paid. Well, you don't get to hear the whole story. Or he had bankruptcies. Oh, my gosh. Can you believe he had bankruptcies? Hey, our country's bankrupt right now because of Obama and the Democrats. Anybody in any kind of business that's been successful in any kind of business, you're going to go through things, whether it be a bankruptcy or whether it be you have disgruntled employees or you have people or contractors who don't follow through with what they're supposed to do. And let's just say if someone for you, working for you, didn't follow what they were supposed to do and do what they were supposed to do, obviously you would be frustrated with them, and probably would be a situation where, if you don't fulfill your end of the deal, then I'm not going to fulfill my end of the deal. I don't think we've heard the whole story. And I personally don't know Donald Trump. I've seen Donald Trump. I know I've been around some people who have been around him. Say he's a genuinely nice guy. You look at his family. His family is wonderful. His children are wonderful. I look at it like this, though, more than anything, is it's the lesser of two evils right now at this point. And it all hinges on this election and who's going to be in charge of our Supreme Court for the next, 30, 40 years.
But leaving aside these, as it were, personal and business issues, and you make a fair point, things are not always what they seem to be on the outside in these rather labyrinthian issues. But he's lost. I mean, you're in Mississippi. There's a lot of black people in Mississippi. His current standing amongst black people is practically zero, because black people and Hispanics, and he's just been to Mexico, are overwhelmingly of the view that Donald Trump is mobilizing on a racial basis people against them. His rhetoric is out of control, JT. When he's up on a platform, you don't know what he's going to say next. Even he doesn't know what he's going to say next.
Well, I'll go with you on this, and his as far as African Americans are concerned, he's reaching out to them right now as what do you have to lose? Because what has the Democratic Party done for the African American community? What has Obama done in the past 8 years for the African American community? Absolutely nothing except divide this country. He hasn't done anything to provide much of anything for anyone except for Syrian refugees and illegal aliens who continue to come into this country. And I'll be honest with you, Nigel was over here not too long ago and interviewed him, and he brought up a good point that went back to Brexit, and it's a lot of things that are echoing over here. As far as Mexicans are concerned, or people from south of the border, what is wrong with a country like the United States wanting to protect its borders? What is wrong with a country such as the United States wanting to make sure they know who is in this country, who they are, where they came from, and how we can keep track of them? You can't do that when you have just mass illegal immigration that's coming into this country. That's what he wants to stop. I haven't heard negativity from Donald Trump toward African Americans, though. I have not heard that out of his mouth. I hear him try to reach them, try to tell them that he's going to try to do what he can for the inner cities, try to help the population as best way they can. Now, again, you would be surprised, African Americans that are supporting him. Martin Luther King's niece, I believe it was, who just came out a couple of days ago supporting Donald Trump. And again, it goes back to the corrupt media who absolutely hides that and buries it and no one sees it.
Well, I've seen the polls, and the polls say that practically zero support for Trump amongst African Americans. And, of course, you talk about immigration in the terms that you do, but your entire country is based upon immigration. It was based upon
legal immigration.
Well,
legal.
There was
the key word.
There was no legal or illegal then, because you went there and you genocidally wiped out the people whose country it was. So I'm not sure how legal that is. You then built a society on the mass enslavement of tens of millions of African Americans. So I'm not sure how legal all of that was. But the key point, leaving aside the moral issues, the key point is Hispanic people constitute a gigantic slice of the U.S. electorate. And the Hispanic people feel under attack by Donald Trump with good reason, and they're all going to vote in overwhelming numbers against him. And given that within 25 years, white Americans will be a minority in the country, that means that the trajectory of Trump is doomed, surely.
Well, that's the key. That's what the Democrats are trying to do. That's why Obama is trying to give amnesty to all of the illegal aliens. It is exactly what you said. It's to dilute a conservative voice here in America. When you look at the media now, for some reason, it's shameful to be a Caucasian in America now because of the media. It's this rhetoric that never stops. But here is what is happening in the United States of America, and it's very comparable to Brexit. It is very comparable to what happened in Great Britain. America is tired of the direction we've been under Barack Obama. They're tired of politicians. They're tired of the people in the world that are a part of the establishment. Donald Trump is not the establishment. I think that is it. He's echoing with the American people. He's telling the American people that this country can be great again. This country was great. It can be great again, and it will be great again. And and of course, as we said, the media wants to hide everything. They want to complain. They want to bring up whatever wedge issue they can make in America, whether it be with homosexuals or transgenders or racism or sexism or class warfare when it comes to people's money. It's just amazing the way the media and the Democrats have tried to divide this country. And we are very divided, but I believe in this division, and I think there's more coming out on Hillary Clinton before it's all said and done, and the media eventually is going to have to cover it. This race is not over. This race is close, and I right now at this point think it's too close to call here in the United States of America, and Donald Trump very well could be the next president.
Well, it's been a pleasure disagreeing with you, and I hope we get a chance to do it again, JT. Thanks very much for joining us from Super Talk.
That's what talk radio is all about, right?
It is indeed. Super Talk, Mississippi. That was JT Williamson, the host of the JT Show, complaining about the far left media, I think you could say, in the United States of America.
Controversial conversation and cutting-edge current affairs comment with the notorious B.I.G.G.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Listen, this guy's a nightmare. He's not a great guy, folks.
Now, Mick Mayo says, you want Ireland to be independent, but not Scotland. Why is this? Give up on Blue Labour. I'm never going to give up on Jeremy Corbyn. I'm never going to give up on the cause of Labour being the hope of the world. But the most important incongruity in the point that you've just made there, Mick, is that I'm against breaking up small islands. I'm against the partition of Ireland, because Ireland is one. It is one small island that should never have been divided. So I want Irish unity and I want British unity. The key is in the word unity. Now, Mark, he's still with us. He's still with us. Mark, you're still outside. It's wonderful to hear from you again. Trump and Scotland you want to talk about. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, George. You all right, mate?
Yes, I'm good, by the grace of God, yes.
Do you know what I wish you'd have done this week, mate? Done like you done, like in your house show when you done last week. You pick a song to go with the particular politics of the moment, yeah?
Well, we've got a very good song to close the show with. But I take your point. It was good last week.
Yeah, so my one last week was Most Likely You'll Go Your Way, I'll Go Mine by the big man Dylan. And tonight it was Slow Train Coming about the sudden rail lag.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm going to move on.
Yeah, go on.
Right, I'm very disappointed with Scotland, mate. I'll start on this quickly. I'm very disappointed with Scotland. I really had a connection with Scotland and thought they looked out for the city of Liverpool and the North East boys, and we looked out for them, and we were sticking together. But the way they ran and they jumped ship on the Labour Party after a long time, and they understand that they might have felt let down by the politicians and that, but they should have held their own, and they should have held their politicians to account. And now on this point about the referendum for another vote, Nicola Sturgeon, if I was a Scottish voter, I would be fuming. I would be looking at her thinking, how dare you? You've just made a promise to the population of this country, and I'd be absolutely devastated, mate.
Yeah, and I think they're underestimating the extent to which the Scottish people are referendumed out. The idea that the Scots want an endless series of never-endums is fundamentally wrong, in my opinion. Are you doing the dishes there at the same time as talking to me?
Yeah, no, I've finished. You know what? I've just burnt my toast, but never mind, mate. You ate that. You ate 2 pieces of bread, lad.
Thanks a lot. Right, go ahead. You wanted to talk about Big Trump.
Yeah, now, do you know what? I watched the documentary, right? I think it was done by that Sopel, John Sopel for the BBC. And it was going round all the different voters asking about Trump. And the language out of them, the viewpoints were that frightening. But what I want to say is the gap between them. How much they feel hearing Trump coming out and supporting the gay community, because they were that livid with the way things have gone in favour of the gay community in their eyes. How would they level it up? And the fact is, they're not. Just the immigration argument is good enough, and that's all it took for someone to make a statement out loud and have some money for him to get to this point. I just can't take it in.
Well, I mean, this is the last cry of the Caucasian, to use JT's phrase earlier, the Caucasian poor. You remember the movie Mississippi Burning? You remember the barber shop scene. This is the last stand of those kind of poor, downtrodden, stupid, undereducated white men that have been let down by the political system, let down by the economy, who've got next to nothing, who are on the wrong side of the tracks, but are looking around for somebody who's even worse off than them. That's the kind of people that are rallying to Trump. All other white people, all other black people, all other Hispanic people are voting against Trump. That's why he's in for a landslide defeat, which unfortunately means we're going to be stuck with Hillary Clinton for the next 4 years. Mark?
Yeah, but George, you know what I don't understand is why Hillary Clinton, listen, all right, I told you I'm not wired up, mate, I'm not on the net, so I've just got to find my own news. But what I don't understand, let's get all the insults and that out the way, and listen, that's not saying that they're not deserved, because they are, But why can't he just be called out on his policy? These people, these poor white people, he's part of the problem. He's the part of the problem who sells the companies over, sends companies over to China. He's one of the main men who's put these people in these positions.
You're right. You're absolutely right. A very good point, Mark. I wish I'd made it myself, but I will now. Thanks for that, Mark in Liverpool. Let's hear from Fraser in Bolton, a wise man, on the Scottish question. Go ahead, Fraser.
Thank you very much, George. Well, the whole thing with the SNP, I'd like to say this one. I grew up in Paisley in the 70s and 80s. I have much more in common with people where I live now in Bolton, a big mill town on the edge of a major city. I have nothing in common with a fisherman from Fraserburgh, bar a flag. Nothing against that fisherman. But for people, this increasing, almost fascistic thing to say, if you're not for independence...
It's a fetishization, isn't it? A fetishization of which part of this rock you were born on. I mean, you made the point about the fisherman from Fraserburgh. It's a very good point. You've got even less in common with Brian Souter, the biggest funder of the independence movement in Scotland, who makes his money from exploiting the workers and the travellers on both sides of the border and in many other countries around the world as the boss of Stagecoach.
Absolutely correct, George. But the main reason I was phoning was this. And my late dad was a wise man. He once said to me, you go into a bookies, you get 4 deaths to pay in, 1 to pay out. Work it out for yourself. Don't gamble. So here's a business proposition. We're going to take over a company, and our only main income stream is going to be from something that is going to run out at some point in the next 30, 40 years. And the price of it will wobble all over the place like a yo-yo, largely through, shall we say, overseas influence like trustable people at the Saudis.
Yeah.
Now, you want me to vote to run an economy based on that? You need your head examining.
Exactly, and the Scottish people are rather good with money, not to put too fine a point on it.
I deny these accusations.
Not to put too fine a point on it. That's why I think that, first of all, this conversation, if it's a real one, will lead her to decide, well, this is not going to go anywhere, if it's a real one, but I don't believe it's a real one.
No, I don't.
If they go for another referendum, they're going to lose it.
Yep.
Because the Scots are not stupid, and they're not going to vote for a flag. You can't eat a flag.
But they need a strong Labour Party up there, George, and I'll just leave that floating in the ether for you, sir.
Do that. Thanks a lot, Fraser. Great to hear from you again. Fraser in Bolton, ex of Paisley, making the point that I try to make, that class is much, much more important than nationality. A nationality you share with people with whom you have absolutely nothing else in common. Class you share with other people with whom you have almost everything in common. It's why Fraser, as a working class man in Bolton, is not amongst foreigners. I have lived in England for the last 30 years. In fact, more than 30 years. And I have never felt that I am a foreigner here. But if I was sitting down with the Duke of Buccleuch and the Duke of Sunderland and the top bankers from Edinburgh and Fred the Shred and Brian Souter, do I need to go on? The Kilties, the White Heather Club, I have nothing whatsoever in common with them other than that I was born on the same piece of rock as them. Do you get my drift? 0844 499 1000. That's the number to call. The mother of all talk shows.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway
on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
I'm enjoying this. I hope you are. 0844 499 1000. I'm here every Friday night, by the way, between 7 and 10. Now, let me take some more of the tweets. Please tell Mark, we Scots abandoned the Blairites, not the country, says Peter in Glasgow. Certainly Blair is a major reason why Labour is in the state that it's in Scotland. Puff the Dragon said, so are you saying you want Ireland to be absorbed into the UK and we'll call it unity? Look nice on the glossy leaflet. I'm saying the absolute opposite of that. I'm saying that Ireland should be reunited. It was unjustly severed. The democratic wishes of the Irish people were denied, and the country was partitioned. If the Scottish people vote to partition this small island of Britain, that must be respected, and separation there must be. But in case you missed it, Puff the Dragon, the Scottish people less than 2 years ago decided no thanks. And a lot of things have changed in that less than 2 years. And almost all of the things that have changed make the case for separatism even weaker than it already was. But let's go to Germany. We've been to Singapore. We've been to Bolton. Let's go to Germany, where John wants to talk about the Scottish referendum. John, go on yourself.
Hello, George. Hi. Well, I'm in Germany, but I'm back in Scotland shortly. Okay. But I've spent a lot of time over here over the years and was disenfranchised in the last referendum vote 2 years ago.
You and me both.
Well, it's a scandal, isn't it, really?
I didn't get a vote, and the SNP wouldn't put anybody up to discuss their big conversation. You couldn't make it up. We want to have a big conversation, but we're not going to come on your radio show.
There's almost 1 million Scots in the overseas territories in England who have relatives, and Cameron drew up the deal or agreed the deal on that referendum, and he almost came unstuck then. He came unstuck just 2 months ago, and he almost ruined the Union 2 years ago by coming to really quite, well, shall we say, preferential terms to the nationalist case at that time, or they would never have even got as close as they did, in my opinion, to the vote that they got. Yep. They disenfranchised all these Scots. Scots have gone abroad throughout centuries.
That was the very meaning of Scotland. Not always for the best of purposes, but the idea that Scotland is an insular, inward-looking, wee place is completely foreign to our history over centuries.
We, as Scots, had a large part in the making of Britain and the United Kingdom. And this whole thing about independence, I personally don't see it that way. What I see is the Scottish nationalists giving away my birthright. England belongs to me, just as much as Scotland belongs to the English people.
Well, don't say that too.
Penzance belongs to me.
don't say that too loudly, because they'll maybe catch on. But the idea that Scottish people are discriminated against in England so flies in the face of all the facts as to be absurd. I've said this before, John. If you switch on Radio 4 in the morning, you'll hear James Naughty chortling away. If you switch on Radio 4 at 5 o'clock in the evening, you'll hear Britain's best broadcaster, Eddie Mair, chortling away with the news. And if you wait up until Newsnight, you'll hear Gavin Esler or Kirsty Wark chortling away, closing the broadcast for the evening. Scottish people are running things in Parliament, in the media, in banking, usually disadvantageously for the mass of the people on both sides of the border. They're involved in international trade, international organizations. The idea that we are some persecuted minority is utterly ridiculous.
People in prominent positions in the Labour Party, in the Conservative Party, in the Liberal Democrat Party, people who had the influence of Scotland in those parties, where are all these people now? People like you aren't there either anymore. Where are all these people on the front bench with Labour, all these Scots that used to be there, and the Liberal Democrats, and the Conservatives? And we've now got this clique of 50-odd people down there. It's a pressure group, and they're doing Scotland no good whatsoever. If anything, they're doing damage down there more than anything. They have set back the interests of Scottish people by decades.
I'll be
And
back.
they're going to be gone in 5 years or 10 years because they're a busted flush now.
I'll be back, John. Don't you worry about that. John in Germany. Let's go to Grant in Alloa. Go ahead, Grant.
Hi there, George. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Go ahead, sir.
So I was looking to talk about the Labour purge, George, and first and foremost, obviously it's a ridiculous situation. Actually, one of my friends was expelled from the party last year, was cleared of the case, and then got expelled just 2 weeks ago, but he's now been let in yet again due to an admin error, shall we say. It's been explained. And what's kind of really annoying me about this purge is that it is an obvious establishment fix, well, the Labour establishment fix against Corbyn. Whether I think Smith could win because of it is a different story. But what I'm saying is, how can Smith and his colleagues turn round to the British electorate, if they did win, and say, vote for the Labour Party, we're the party for fairness and equality in society, when you cheat your own members out of a vote, when you're purging people who deserve to vote and are not getting a chance to vote because of some silly admin error or because they've liked a page on Facebook. I've seen some ridiculous things, George.
Yeah. No, well, I think there's two sides to that coin, and you're absolutely right to bring it up. First of all, why should anyone support a party that so hates even its own members, it's prepared to go to these lengths to try and purge them, to try and deny them their legitimate rights, has been prepared to use their money to go to court to stop them from voting? That's number one. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is this. All these attacks, every single attack on Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, that has been mounted by these plotters, by these traitors, has been carefully logged in their own constituency and in the national media. And if Jeremy Corbyn is re-elected as the leader and leads Labour into the next general election, how can these very same MPs ask people to vote to put him into Downing Street after all that they have said about him? So it's a completely ridiculous, untenable, unsustainable situation. It's a zero-sum game. They have to win later this month, or they have lost everything, and vice versa. So where does this all end, Grant?
Well, I don't know exactly where it could end, George. I mean, what would the way I see it possibly going? Because I don't think Smith even wants to win. I think there's something behind his campaign that suggests to me that he doesn't want to win. Because if
he was going to win, he wouldn't have been the candidate.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, he doesn't even condemn the members. I thought if his PR man had any sense, they would have condemned the members for being excluded, because surely you're trying to win these people over rather than discriminate against them. But I mean, George, I think it's got to go one way. Either these people get deselected or reselected. Even I'd support mandatory reselection rather than deselection. Or they may break off, and I think there is a big feeling that they are going to break off. If they stay and paralyse the party, then that's the worst case scenario,
yeah, that is the worst case scenario. And Corbyn would be a fool to allow these people, the day after he's re-elected for the second time in 2 consecutive years, if he allows them to say, right, the campaign for next year's leadership challenge starts now, and we're going to run the same kind of campaign against our leader for the next 12 months that we've done for the last 12 months. If Corbyn accepts that, then he's a fool. Grant in Alloa, thanks very much for the call.
Big Georgie Galloway's back on the radio! Galloway, celebrate! The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway on Talk Radio.
Well, I'm coming to the end, alas, of tonight's show. The good news is, God willing, I'll be here next week at the same time, between 7 and 10, only on Talk Radio. I seem to have stirred up a hornet's nest of Scottish nationalists. Stephen Birrell says we voted for this one, and puts what I think is a small, tiny, I can hardly see it, facsimile of the European Union flag. More fool you, Stephen. More fool you. But I'll tell you what, if you think the Scottish people are going to break away from the rest of this island because of that EU flag, you've got another think coming, boy, as your conversation may or may not tell you. But if it proceeds to a referendum, it definitely will. Let's hear about Donald Trump from Steve in the bush, Shepherd's Bush in London. Go ahead, Steve.
Hello, George. The best description I've heard about the race between Clinton and Trump, actually I heard it on Talk Radio, I think it was yesterday, and it was described as an ugly baby contest, which it, I suppose, truly is.
Yes.
And the thing about Trump, many of the things one of the reasons he's so unpopular with his own party is, bizarre as it may seem, but he's one of the moderates. Out of all the candidates for the nomination, he was always stated to be the moderate. Now, I tried to find evidence of this, but I couldn't really. But I kept hearing it from the various experts, etc. That I haven't established how he is a moderate. But the one thing that
God save us if he's a moderate, Steve.
Exactly, George. But the one thing that I think is key is that if you were to give Hillary Clinton the option of wiping out Al-Qaeda, Assad, or ISIS, she would attack Putin. And I believe
she threatened Russia with war just the other day.
George, this is what I mean. She frightens me.
Yeah, no, she frightens me too.
I think it would make such a refreshing change to have a president of the United States who actually regarded Russia as a friend and an ally.
Well,
he
does.
People that saved us from Hitler.
Well, he does on Tuesdays, but on Thursdays he's capable of going to war with them. I mean, that's the problem that we've got, Steve. We've got someone who's a known, unremitting, remorseless killer, corrupt killer, against somebody who is completely berserk. And I mean berserk. He's capable of launching a war, dare I say it, in 45 minutes. Because he got up on the wrong side of bed, because he's in a bad mood.
I do agree that he is very thin-skinned for somebody that's meant to be a candidate for the presidency. I totally accept that. It's just that, as I said, in years, this is the first time I've ever heard, yes, I know he lacks consistency, but the first time I've ever heard anything positive said about Putin, Russia, and the Russian people. Yeah.
But it wouldn't last. What I'm saying to you, Steve, is it wouldn't last. It wouldn't last because this man is putty. He's plasticine. Anyone can. I mean, as Oscar Wilde once put it, he bears the impression of those who last sat upon him. Steve, thank you very much. In the bush on Donald Trump, let's go to Guy in Stoke-on-Trent on the Jeremy Corbyn rally, which took place there, I think, today. Was it, Guy?
No, it wasn't today. It was the 1st of September.
Okay.
It was a couple of days ago, and I went up there with some trepidation because the Stoke-on-Trent MPs are quite anti-Jeremy Corbyn, and one of our MPs is one of the major players there in trying to get him...
Do you mean Tristram?
Oh, I do, yes, unfortunately, yes. Nice bloke, but I don't know. He doesn't strike me as a
nice
lazy
but
guy.
dim. He's the wisest fool in Christendom.
Anyway, so I went up to the town centre there, and I'm pleased to say that it was ram-packed. It was like a carriage on the Virgin train. It was chock-a-block.
Was it an outdoor rally, Guy?
It was outdoor, yeah. It was in the town centre.
You see, that's the thing. I fill halls everywhere I go, but Jeremy Corbyn fills town centres. You couldn't get a hall big enough for Jeremy Corbyn's crowds.
It was a big crowd. It was a lot of support for Jeremy Corbyn.
What was the morale? What was the morale like amongst the people?
It was a very upbeat atmosphere. There was a very small brass band playing. So prior to Jeremy coming, a lot of the crowd was singing and swaying and waving. So it was an upbeat atmosphere. It was a positive atmosphere. It was a delight to be there. Later on, well, no sooner had the rally finished that I listened on the BBC radio, and they said there were hundreds of people there. Well, I know it's difficult to count the crowds, but I would have said there was at least 1,000 people there, and other people said there were 2,500 people. But I'm almost used to the fact now that if there's any story about Jeremy Corbyn, let's make it a negative story.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, when the history of this period comes to be written, it's actually embarrassing. It's embarrassing, the level of distortion that Goebbels himself would blush at the propaganda offensive that has been launched against Jeremy Corbyn, and it reaches every corner. You heard me talk earlier, I don't want to go into more details. It reaches into corners of people who know nothing whatsoever about politics, who don't discuss politics, but they know that Corbyn is somebody to be sneered at. Because they've bought into what is a tsunami, a tidal wave of propaganda, which so flies in the face of the actual reality that there's no politician in Britain who could put 1,000 people, let's call it 1,000, on the city centre of Stoke-on-Trent.
No.
And by the way, there never has been. Even Mr. Benn, at his height, could not have dreamt of putting 1,000 people on the city square in Stoke-on-Trent.
But as regards the propaganda, I think the thing which compounded it for myself was that on the same day, 3 of the national newspapers of the country decided to publish a story from June of this year in which yet another Stoke-on-Trent Labour MP had received, some said 20, others said 20,000 abusive emails, and how she spun a story that Jeremy Corbyn hadn't done enough to protect her and what have you.
Well,
there you go.
This Egypt in the Rhondda for now, Bryant, got a death threat in the week, and in a deliberate, weasel-worded statement, sought to imply that was somehow Jeremy Corbyn's fault, even though 50 MPs had received that death threat. On an alphabetical basis, the lunatic who was sending them was doing the A's first, the B's second, and no doubt the next day going on to the C's. And those who received the death threat were from all political parties. What kind of sickness is it that leads you to think or say, even if you haven't thought, that is somehow Jeremy Corbyn's fault?
They spin that he's unelectable. Well, I'm convinced that the reason they spin so much negative stories about him because they know that he actually is electable.
Well, that's exactly. I mean, I've said this before. It's kind of blindingly obvious. If the Tories and the right-wing media really thought Jeremy Corbyn was unelectable, they'd be campaigning to keep him as the leader of the Labour Party. Isn't that blindingly obvious? If he was unelectable, why would anybody who wanted Labour to be unelectable be campaigning to get rid of an unelectable Labour leader?
Oh, we live in strange times. We live in strange times.
We do, but you and I can see straight. Thanks for that, Guy, bringing us up to date on what happened in Stoke-on-Trent. Jim Corbyn, who has a flag. It's a Scottish flag, I think. I remember the promises made to Scotland, George. The vow, carbon capture, HMRC, steel, shipbuilding, 200B oil. I don't know, Jim, quite what that means. But if your point is that the Scottish people are ready now for another independence referendum, I'm here to tell you, bring it on. Bring it on, Jim. Let's have the referendum. Let's forget the conversation. Let's go for another referendum. Here is the Owen Smiths.
I was lobbying for Pfizer and earning loads, but heaven knows I'm radical now. I was in the shadow cabinet, then I left the shadow cabinet, and heaven knows I'm radical now. In my life, why did I spend much of my time championing big pharma incentives and PFI? Jeremy Corbyn mustn't win, so heaven knows I'm radical now. I was shadow working pension secretary, then I wasn't shadow working pension secretary, and heaven knows I'm radical now. Here's the gist: you're all a bunch of lousy interests, but me, I am an old school Welsh socialist. I really am. I was lobbying for Pfizer and earning loads, but heaven knows I'm radical now. You're changing your tune so much, you said, and yet I'm backed by red air. In my life, why did I try to privatise the hell out of everything and lie? I should point out I'm radical, not radicalised.
That's the Owen Smiths. I don't know if any of them were in the Smiths. Certainly sounded as dismal to me as the Smiths used to sound. But thanks for that to the friends who sent it in, and good luck to the Owen Smiths. I think it will be a one-hit wonder. I don't expect that we'll be troubled by the Owen Smiths much beyond the end of September. But whether someone else will emerge is, of course, a moot point. What happens next is something we'll be keeping a close eye on. It's been marvellous for me. I hope it was for you. And if so, come back next week.